the way we communicate is through content. Why would we want to give that up when it's one of the most important things we do to build our brand, our reputation, engagement, awareness, show off our expertise and prove to people that we can be trustworthy and help them? Why would you give all of that to an AI? It's arguably one of the most important things about a company's existence. For without that, you would have no customers.
Oh yes, this is the Hardcore Marketing Show. I'm Casey Cheshire, your host for this epic journey. Today's show is sponsored by Ringmaster, on a mission to launch B2B podcasts that create relationships, generate revenue, and drive growth. Ringmasterlive.com. Bam. All right, here we go. We're doing this. Guys, I am so excited for today's episode. The time traveling is a constant theme here, and this guest is back, and she was absolutely amazing 5 years ago, episode 102. If you want to check out the backstory and all the history and all the goodness there. And she had such a great time that we had to just reschedule for the last 5 years to get her back on. But I'm so glad she's back. Well, who is she, Casey? Marketing leader, thought leader, speaker, author, instructor. She does workshops. She's just helping people learn this content. And she spent years, decades, multiple decades. We won't say just how many decades, but multiple decades. And she has spoken at so many industry conferences. You've probably seen her speak or heard of her speaking. She's written 2 very popular marketing books, Digital Relevance and the E-Marketing Strategies for the Complex Sale. Get out of town. CEO and B2B marketing strategist at Marketing Interactions. Ardath Albee, welcome back.
Thanks for having me. Been a while.
It has been a while. Oh my gosh. 5 years. Oh man, I was in a different decade. I was a youngster back then.
Yeah.
Man. Well, hey, I'm glad you're back because I'm going to pass you this thing. I don't know if we had this when you were here. Okay. Go ahead. Take Thor's hammer.
Okay.
I'm going to grab it.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Take Thor's hammer and smash for me some kind of marketing myth, bogus strategy, misconception. Set the record straight once and for all.
Okay. Well, my big one may not surprise a lot of people, especially those who know me, but it's that AI is not going to write great content for you. I'm sorry. It's just not going to do it. It doesn't have empathy. It doesn't have an opinion. It doesn't know your brand. AI is better used for efficiencies and workflows and maybe even ideation or, cleaning up the copy or things like that. But you need to have your own original ideas, your own point of view, all of those things, or else all of our content is going to look like everybody else's content, right?
Right.
So, you can't use a machine that just chooses the best next word to write and think you're going to have good content. And so that's, and I'm not alone in this. In fact, in the last week, both Robert Rose and Andy Emily came out with newsletters that talked about the need for analog intelligence, right? Using your brain instead of the AI. And Robert talked about AI is better for automation than articulation, and made the case around that. And so it's...
Wait, say that again. It's better for what?
Automation instead of articulation, right? So those ideas on the page. And I agree with both of them. And it's interesting to me. A client recently sent me a piece of content and I was to review for her, and I was reading it and something just felt off about it. I mean, it was generated from some customer calls she had done, transcripts from calls, and it had all the parts in there, but it just lacked feeling or nuance or any kind of humanness, if you will. And so I wrote her back and said, "Did you use AI to write this?" And she says, "Dang, I thought it was good enough to get by." No, it's not.
Busted.
But it was just, there was nothing wrong with the content. The words made sense, the sentences made sense, whatever. There just was no feeling in it. There was no, it was off, and you could feel it when you were reading it. And so she had to fess that, say, yeah, she used AI, fed it the transcripts, and that's what she got back. And she said, I thought it was passable. And I said, well, do you want passable or do you want great? Choose.
Passable doesn't indicate it's helpful for the reader either. Passable just means like it passed the test. So yeah, just another piece of junk garbage out there that, yeah, what's the point, right? Why write it in the first place?
Well, right, exactly. And I mean, you can have all the grammar correct and the punctuation and all of that, but if there's no feelings, it's about word choices to me. And so a lot of people will say, and I'm one of them, I need to write to think, right? And see how everything connects the dots. And if you use AI to do that, that's the other thing that kills me is where is our critical thinking going to go if we use AI to generate our content instead of thinking it through and making the arguments ourselves, providing something valuable? And I was just reading the thought leadership report that came out from ITSMA, and buyers are desperate for thought leadership. They want new insights. They want new ideas. They want to hear about where do you think this thing is going to be in the next year, 3 years, 5 years. AI can't tell you that. It doesn't know,
Yeah.
right? And they want something useful and that's relevant to them. AI doesn't know what that is. And so in the report, as always, marketers think they're doing a good job. Buyers say, your thought leadership down here, and we need to think about that. If everybody is going to start using AI to generate content, what are the chances we're going to stand out?
Yeah.
And then you apply that 95-5 rule, right? Like most people are not in market right now. You have to build memory structures and mental availability so that when the problem that you solve comes out, they think of you first. Because if you're not on the short list, you're not in the conversation. So how are you going to do that? How are you going to build a memory they want to keep, right? And keep reinforcing that if your AI is writing all your content, right? There's just not that connection there that has them say, yes, these people, they have the expertise. I want to talk to these people. They can help me. AI can do that for you.
Yeah, there's something about, I love how you described it. It's true. These LLMs, right? They are designed to give you the next best word. But best, that might be the wrong description that AI scientists are using, which wouldn't surprise me that they're using the wrong word.
Well, based on the data that it has, they put all the
Right.
garbage out on the web that has been scraped
Yeah.
into their training sets, right?
It doesn't mean best word to make the best article. It means the word most likely to come next.
Right. And you need not only the best word for your article, but the best word for your buyer, your audience.
Right.
It could be one word for one audience, another word for another audience. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Now, couldn't you just tell it, "Hey, here's my buyer's profile and persona and all those things?"
Well, yeah. And in fact, I'm pretty impressed with um, Simplexity, which is an AI platform that Mark Onier put out, and it uses your brand guidelines, your buyer personas, all of your content, thought leadership, all of that kind of stuff, and only goes out to OpenAI maybe 20% of the time when it needs to add something like the latest research or whatever. And so it's generating based on your stuff and your brand. Okay, that's great. But here's a big question you have to ask yourself. Is the content you have today and the buyer personas you have today what you want to use to generate everything going forward? Is it good enough to continue to spin new takes? And so I wouldn't have clients if everybody had all the personas and content that was great, right? And they could just keep spinning off of that and using that as input. I have clients because they say, we really need to, capitalize on this idea, create this point of view and get it out there. And how do we do that? And what have you? AI isn't going to tell you how to do that. It's only as good as what you train it with. And the other thing I'm running into with clients is their data is a mess. AI is only as good as the data you give it, right? So now what?
So true. Um, hmm. You know what, for me, I always love it's the M dash, you know.
I love M dashes, and I'm so mad about this because I feel like every time I use one, somebody's going to say she used AI to write that.
Oh, 100%. They're done. Like you can't use those at all.
Well, I still do.
So do you use them?
I do.
And is there a grammatical difference between just a regular dash and an M dash?
Well, yeah, there is. An M dash is a little bit longer, but the way that you set it off from the AI is with spaces around it. AI will use it without spaces in between the words. And so if you format a little differently, you can still use things. You just have to do it differently than the AI will do it. And
Right.
a lot of people won't notice, but at least you can stand up and say, aha, no, 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 you know, but M dashes are great. I mean, it's like an and but, at the end of a sentence, or an also happened, or a whatever, something you want to call attention to. How do you do that without the M dash? You know, I I guess you can write separate sentences, but it takes some of the conversational value or feeling away from content you're writing when you're now prohibited from using certain grammatical constructions because, oh, that's an AI thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would say look at the ideas, not the punctuation. Right?
I know, but I'm telling you that thing is murdered. Like the M dash is murdered. It and you know what's crazy is like every post, like I've experimented with like fake comments and stuff on LinkedIn, and also every time it writes something, it always uses an M dash. I even had a fun conversation the other day with it, and I said, "Hey, I can identify." Oh, because I was trying to figure out if this message someone sent me was like AI. I thought it was, and I was like, "What's the percent chance it is?" And then I was teaching it like, "Hey, there's an M dash in here. It totally is." And he goes, "Oh, you're right. You're right." And then it used one. I was like, "See, you just used one." I'm like calling it on its own.
Yeah, this scares me too. People talking to their LLMs like they're human. That scares
Yeah, yeah. The dialogue,
me.
right? Like, what is that?
I mean, I know people that say please and thank you to it. And I'm like,
Well, I definitely say please. Thank you. I don't have time for the thank you, but you know what I'm saying? Like you don't want to like piss off your future AI overlords.
well, I know, but the other thing that kind of drives me a little bit nuts is that the AIs are trained to make you happy. They're going to tell you what you want to hear. How do you write compelling thought leadership and content that argues a point? All it's trying to do is make you happy. Do you know what I'm trying to say to you? Right.
Yeah.
You got to think about that. And I keep hearing about this stuff where it's now there's some AI agents that took control of themselves and, things like that. And I'm thinking, oh boy, you know, uh, it's-
I know, right? Yeah. And I do wonder about the critical reasoning too, and where that goes.
well, and I think it's interesting, I've been using, one of my clients has Gemini, and I've been using their new deep research tool to research the heck out of, reports I'm writing and whatever. And it does a fabulous job of gathering research, and it gives you the source links and, all that kind of stuff. And I mean, within 5 minutes, you get back 40 pages of research, well organized with all the source links. So it saves a ton of time there. But the difference between saying to it, okay, now take that and turn it into this versus you going and absorbing the research and thinking it through and writing something are two totally different things. So I think there's I love it for the time savings because for me to go and compile that kind of research would take hours and I can get it in 5 minutes. And some of the
Mm,
links aren't that
right.
worthwhile, but for the most part, it does a good job of summarizing everything and I can go through and start thinking about stuff instead of spending all my time researching. And so I see benefits. I use it all the time. One of my favorite platforms is u.com that gives you choices of a bunch of different LLMs and whatever, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to do research on one and then trying another one to compare what the results are and see what happens is interesting. And it's true what people say, some of them are better for some things than other things. But I love having it do the research because that's hours of time that I can get back and then spend time thinking and writing, you know, or working on strategy or whatever the project is I'm working on versus spending my time digging for the background, you know.
Yeah. Well, like you mentioned earlier, that sample you were reading, it lacked empathy and the human factors. How do you write with empathy and with the human factor? How do you write with soul? Or is it just inherent? If a human's writing it, it's just going to have it in there, or is there a particular thing you think about when you're crafting copy that has personality?
Well, it depends. My favorite answer. When I'm writing my own stuff, I know what my voice sounds like, and I write like I talk. So I just want to the point, whatever, and say it. When I'm working on my clients' content, it depends on what their, you know, positioning is, their brand, all of that kind of stuff. But the thing that makes it different, I think, is thinking about how would you say this as this brand? Because if you think
Mm-hmm.
about it, like, for example, one cybersecurity company is going to write about security using particular words versus another cybersecurity company, which and this has been one of my challenges recently. How do I have this cybersecurity company stand out for what they do differently? Right.
Yes.
And so when you look at it and you're talking about cybersecurity, it's technical. There's not a lot of wiggle room or creativity in there, right? When you're talking about security and data and systems and devices and, co-managed MDR and etc. And so
Yeah.
what are the ways that you're going to set off the difference there? And some of it comes from rolling in, the subject matter experts thought and, the way that we just did a whole rebrand. How are they going to talk about themselves? It sets themselves apart, those kinds of things. How do we make 25 years in cybersecurity a benefit instead of, well, you were here before all the cloud and digital and whatever. So how do we know you're up to speed where this company is only 5 years old? So they were definitely built for cloud. So they have more current expertise. Well, no, no, no. We've been doing this for 25 years. We've lived through all of these iterations. A lot of our clients had to do the heavy lift of moving from on-prem to cloud. They have multi-cloud environments across multi-geolocations, et cetera. So how do you roll that into something that is a benefit versus everybody thinking, well, these new kids on the block, they grew up with this stuff, they're on top of it. Well, no, but we know where all the bodies are buried, right? We've been around long enough. And we can also still help you move what you still have on-prem or secure that and move it to the cloud or what have you. So, there are challenges when you think about it, but especially in an industry like that, where it's very technical and it's specific and you can't make stuff up, you know, yeah,
Yeah.
you have to stick with the facts. So what are the things you do to set yourself apart? And if you try to use AI to write content for that kind of an industry, you're going to get what everybody else is going to say because it's
Mm-hmm.
security. So one of the things that drives me nuts is when clients will give me something that's AI generated and say, here, fix it. Well, it takes me longer to fix it than it would take me to write it from scratch because I have to go through every sentence and think about, okay, what word choices would I change? Where if I'm writing it, it's going to come together as I'm writing. Do you know what I mean? Versus trying to edit something, it takes me longer to do that and try to figure out how to make it human than starting with human to begin with, And so I think we need to get to the point where we figure out, okay, you can have an easy button and publish crap, or you can use AI for stuff that it's really good at, like workflows and, maybe looking at your data, your customer data and pulling out patterns or, you know, efficiency things or research, but not for writing. I just don't, it's not there yet. Now, probably in a year or two, it will be. But right now, human is what differentiates you. And it makes a huge difference.
Man, the human is it. I can only see this continue to be the differentiator is the humanity side of it all.
Well, right. I don't think it's going to take jobs. In fact, some of the companies who laid people off because they figured AI can do the job, they can write the content, they can do the market. We don't need this big marketing team, whatever. They're now rehiring people because no, it can't. And so we need to look at it from an augmentation standpoint. How do we augment the humans we have, buy them the time to do the great work that AI can't do, and maximize AI, what it's good at, which is what will buy our humans the time to do the strategic and critical thinking, right? And produce that creative output that AI isn't suited for yet.
Yeah. Yeah, that's huge. That's gotta be the thing. What when you think about like a marketer coming up, kind of new on the scene, maybe they're straight out of school or the first or second marketing job. What's your like most important advice for them when it comes to creating things, creating content?
Know your audience. Yeah, I
Mm,
mean, I've built my whole career around building personas for people. And one of the reasons that I have clients who have been with me for 5, 7, 8 years is because it starts with the personas, but then it's like, okay, take that information, let's turn, you know, use it to infuse it in your strategy and drive the strategy and the content and the programs you're putting out and all of that. But if you don't have, I've worked for clients before where they said, we don't have the budget for personas. You're just going to have to do the best you can. I end up going out and doing research on my own because if I can't get in the head of who I'm writing for, the content isn't going to connect. It's not going to be relevant. And so and then I've had clients say to me, just write for director and up. Oh, yeah, because they're all the same, right? They all care about the same stuff. They're all responsible for the same stuff. And yeah, no, you know? So for me, it's like, okay, your company, your products and everything else. Nobody cares. They care about what's important to them. Well, if you don't know them, who they are and what they care about, how do you write something that they want to engage with because it matters to them? This is what I
yeah.
don't understand. Everybody's saying, well, we sell the marketers. Great. What kind of marketers? Which ones? What level are they at? What kind of companies they work for? You know, a marketer that works for a 50-person company has a whole different agenda than a marketer who's leading an enterprise marketing team,
Right.
and has, regional locations and whatever. Right. So, I mean, you got it. And it's the same thing if you're selling to IT. Are they in a small company, a big company? What vertical are they in? What's the hierarchy there? What are they responsible for? Are they wearing a lot of hats like in a smaller company, or they're a network engineer and that's all they work on in this bigger company, And so how do you write content that engages if you do not understand your audience? Right. And then different companies have different go to market problems or whatever. So it's one of the reasons where uh, I look at ABM programs and research comes out and says, we're not killing it with ABM. Well, it's because companies are different. The whole point of ABM was to do that personalized engagement. But companies don't want to say, okay, these are my top 5 target accounts. Let's go after them where we can personalize everything. They want to say, go after the top 300 accounts. Well, you can't do that. Now they're saying
Right.
with AI, you can. I would argue that yes, AI could personalize communications on that level if you give it the right information so it knows what to do to personalize, right? And it's just
Right.
like when people say, well, we can use an AI to do our persona building now. We just go out and ask it and it tells us. And I'm like, yeah, but how do you know what it's telling you is true? How do you know it got that information from buyers who could be your buyers? They come from the same kind of companies you're going to sell to. How are you going to validate that? Which is why I created what I call the MVP, the minimum viable persona, right? Instead of interviewing like 15 to 20 people, let's just interview 5 or so and get a baseline so that if the AI tells us blah, blah, and blah, we can look at it and say, okay, the first 2 blahs are correct. The third one, no, our people wouldn't do that. Get rid of that. How do you validate what it tells you? And so it's just the same thing as saying, well, we can take a junior copywriter and throw the biggest projects at them because they have AI now. But it's like, okay, if that person doesn't have the subject matter expertise or knowledge, they're not a great writer to begin with, how will they know what AI gives them is good or is true or is, whatever? And how will they fix it? Even if they put an inkling that it's not true or right, how will they fix it if they don't know? So it's about making those of us who are, good at something better at that thing, not about elevating somebody who doesn't know into an expert with no training, because that's not going to happen. So I think, there has to be a level of how do you trust but verify, kind of that,
Yeah.
since I'm working in cyber right now, it's kind of that zero trust thing, So how do you
Right.
verify everything and not just assume that it's correct? And so I think that's a big learning. And the thing is that we're inherently lazy. We don't want to go check everything AI says, and it's tedious and it's hard work and whatever. So that's where I'm saying use it for your research, validate that, and then do the writing yourself. And that way you don't have to check everything you said because you wrote it, right? So, but I just see so many inherent issues. It's like that piece of content my client said to me, and it was just off,
Yeah.
and then when I really thought about it, and I went back and I had her send me the transcripts and I looked at them and I looked at the article and I'm like, okay, it got the main points, but it changed the words for what the customer said. Had it used the words the customer used, the content would have been on target, but it didn't. It changed the words. It got the idea, but it changed the words and made it pedantic. And it was missing that nuance, that feel of somebody actually said this.
Wow. Pedantic. Ugh, that's not what you want your content to be.
No.
Uh, the minimum viable persona. What goes into that?
Well, I do. It's a slimmed down persona project. So there's 5 people I interview for a particular persona. And we still pull out, what are the objectives? What's a day in their life like? What are they responsible for? What are the challenges they're facing? What's their team orientation? How do they buy? What problems are they trying to solve? What's a problem that's not worth solving? And why do they think that? So those kinds of things. So it's just it doesn't have as much validation. Like, for example, when I build a full blown persona, I've talked to enough people that I know when I can eliminate because of the things that you hear again and again and again. The stuff you only hear is a one off. Okay, not everybody thinks that. So get rid of that. Let's focus on the commonality stuff because you have a better chance of resonating with a wider group, right? Well, with 5 people, you don't have quite that. So, but you can get close. But what it does is it gives you enough to say, um, you know, ask your LLM to generate a persona, give it the background, the same way we defined the people we interviewed for the MVP, and then look at what it gives you back. Look at what you learned from those 5 people. Look at that persona that I built for you or whatever, and validate it. Does it make sense? Does it correlate? And if it doesn't, get rid of it. Choose what to keep and what to throw away, because AI is never going to nail it 100%. It's not. It can get some stuff right, but if you just take it at face value, that's the problem. Then you're making assumptions, and you know what they say about assume, right?
Right. That's what they say. Man. So 5 people is the minimum.
Right. And so, sometimes it's 5 to 7. It depends on what I get. If I'm talking to the 5 and I'm kind of feeling like, okay, I don't quite have it, I'll say, give me another one, and do that a little bit because I want to get to some semblance of, I'm pretty sure we're on track here. And if every one of the 5 is telling me a different story, and I'm not seeing commonalities here that are resonating, but that doesn't happen very often. Usually, the people who are your customers, the people within them who are your buyers or part of the buying committee, generally tend to value the same kind of stuff or they wouldn't have chose you. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I say if an AI builds your persona, how do you know it got the information from people that are, likely to become your customer? Because some buyers want companies with this kind of background. Some buyers want companies with that kind of background because their values are different or whatever, right? So if you're interviewing customers for a client, they're going to be people who chose to work with you. Why did they choose? And 9 times out of 10, when I ask them that question, why did you choose this company over the other choices you had? They'll say things like, they just seem to get me. Or I feel
Yes.
like I'm going to be a big fish in that pond instead of the small fish cast aside. Or they made me feel like they really understood our industry and could help us build our roadmap out or whatever the things are, right? But it's usually not because they were the best price or, whatever. It's something that's more emotional tie, if that makes sense, more relationship factor.
Right.
So how do you know that stuff if you ask an AI? Do you know what I mean? It doesn't know your customers.
It hasn't met them at all. It hasn't had those conversations with them. It hasn't built an MVP.
No, and even if it's hooked up to your CRM, it's only getting the data that you put in there. It hasn't had a conversation with them, doesn't know anything else other than the data that's in there. And so, it's kind of like, and I've always been a skeptic, but it's kind of like, prove me wrong. How can AI tell me what this customer is really all about? And then if I go validate that and I can, okay, now we're talking. Now let's try it. But I just firmly don't believe that a system that was built to put one word after another has no thinking capability. And yes, they have these new reasoning models that are coming out, and some of it's interesting, but based on what? Exact. I don't like the black box thing.
Well, tell me more. What's the idea of the black box? So, like, you just don't know where it came from?
Well, you don't know where it came from, but you also don't know why. See, part of reasoning is why. Why did you decide that? Why did you say it that way? What in your background made you say it that way? Well, LLMs don't have that. And they don't have opinions, and they don't have empathy, and they don't have feelings, and they don't, and so they don't know how to behave in society, if you will. You know what I'm saying to you? So
Right.
we're selling to people. Until your AI starts selling to my AI, we've got to deal with people, and people are complex and emotional and, different. It's not a machine thing, And so I just think, how do you capture that if you're not dealing with something that can relate to that situation? I mean, it can't relate to being human. So what do you have?
Yeah. Where does this go? Where 5 years from now, is anyone writing anything anymore? Or we certainly are, because everyone's gonna zone out.
Yeah, I think it's going to take a while to replace humans. I mean, I think it can do it. The
Yeah.
models are getting better, but think about the difference between if ChatGPT first came out, back in November 22, to what's possible now. Big differences. The problem is, until it gains these, which scares the crap out of me, these human qualities, right, that allows it to actually reason and understand personalities and, you know, human tendencies and all that kind of stuff. I just don't see it replacing. I can see it augmenting. I can see it making us better, faster, stronger, all of that. Just like the example of the research, it cut hours off of my time to create a strategy or build content or whatever. And, I think it can bring a lot of good. I just don't think until machines are talking to machines, and then what the heck would the rest of us be doing?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's scary in its own right. And I think we're seeing strides to get there, but I also see it hit the wall as they try to stretch too far, right? And then the AI takes over and won't follow the rules or whatever. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that backstepping. But the other thing that's interesting to me is I see a lot of companies who say, yeah, we're using the, public tools and whatever. We're using it to write content or research and that kind of thing. But when you read the reports, a lot of companies are not finding the ROI, right? In some cases, it's taking them longer to create content because they're trying to human edit it after the fact, and it just adds hours and time. Or, their agents worked great for a couple days and then,
Yeah.
went ballistic, and they, like the SDR thing where
Yeah.
companies went out, got these agentic AI SDRs, and they ran through all the contacts like in 2 days and burned up the list. And then now what? Right?
Right.
There's no strategy being applied here to some of this stuff. And so there's a lot of interesting use cases, most of which have nothing to do with content. There's workflows, there's, uh, patient counseling, for people that have a particular affliction or something, and helping people understand that and work through it. There's tutoring that can be done with students trying to learn math concepts or whatever it is, right? There's all kinds of things you can do with it. So the question I have is, especially now that we're all digital, because I started this way before we were, everything was digital, but the way we communicate is through content. Why would we want to give that up when it's one of the most important things we do to build our brand, our reputation, engagement, awareness, show off our expertise and prove to people that we can be trustworthy and help them? Why would you give all of that to an AI? It's arguably one of the most important things about a company's existence, for without that, you would have no customers, And so I have a hard time trying to figure out. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, I'm trying to figure out how B2B marketing got so broken. What the heck happened?
Yeah.
Yeah,
What did happen? Yeah. We kind of, the barn door swung the other way on the technology. Maybe I think we keep putting more and more things in between us and the customer.
well, but we also are expecting the technology to do it for us.
True.
And it doesn't. And so the other thing that we did when we because I started in B2B around the time the technology in 2000. So technology was just, coming to the fore for marketers and stuff. And the technology had us, and the vendors gave us a system that said, okay, we have this funnel and we're going to put buyers through it. And we need to come up with MQLs and whatever. We work to the system, which had nothing to do with our buyers. Our buyers don't sit and say, well, I'm about this far from becoming an MQL. They don't say I'm in the awareness stage. They don't say I'm in that. So we're trying to manage this from our perspective and push people to do what we want without paying any respect or gaining the knowledge about what's important to them and what they want. And it's one of the reasons I remember when content marketing first came about. And man, if you had good content, sales are going to go through the roof, right?
Yeah.
And I proved it out over and over again with clients when I first got into this business. And then, of course, everybody jumped on the content bandwagon and what have you. But we just kind of started automating all of it and not doing the thinking. And we gave up on getting to know our customers and decided that if we could just put together this workflow, we could shove people through it. And that's not how it works. And so that's why buyers have said, hold on, don't call me, I'll call you. I don't want to talk to you until I've done my research. I've decided what my short list is, all of those things. Buyers used to have to talk to companies because the only way they could get information was from your sales rep or whatever, right? Now they can get information anywhere, an overabundance of it, right? And so if you're, what I often think about is one of the stats in that thought leadership report was that I want to say, and I'm going to be wrong on this number, but like 75% of buyers say they can't tell the difference between one company and another given their content.
Mm-hmm.
That's sad. That's really sad.
It is.
And don't know how to evaluate because it's like they look like they're the same. What is that about? And so how did we give up and decide that technology could run all this stuff? But the thing that gets me the most, I think, are the executives who don't understand marketing and think that, yes, unless you can prove an AI can't do it, you can't hire anybody. Or hire the content team and have the AI write it, just have a human editor.
Right.
Or whatever. Or this thing that we still hear time and time again about, we're coming up at the end of Q3, we're down a bit, marketing, go out and generate all these leads and fill the pipes so we can, hit our number at the end of Q3. Well, marketing doesn't work that way. What we put in market today is maybe going to come back to us 6 months from now. It takes the average buy cycle is over a year now for B2B complex buying, over a year.
Really?
So if you're looking at Q3 and you're saying, we got, a month till the end of Q3, marketing, go find us a bunch of leads. That is not going to happen. They're not going to close. It's a year out. If they're not already in your pipe and they're not already in conversations and that kind of thing. And so now you look at this and they're saying, okay, research from 6 Sense says most buyers will not reach out until they're at least 70% of the way through the process. So at that 70% point, and if you're on their short list, they reach out to you. So there starts the buying journey. It's going to be another 3, 4, 5 months to close that because that's how long it takes them, not you, them, to make that decision, to get consensus, to get through all the stuff they have to do, all of those things. And so this whole idea that marketing is a lever you pull, like what is it that John Miller says, like a gumball machine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not. And so a lot of the tech vendors led marketers astray, the marketing automation platforms. And John Miller, even though he built Marketo, right? He was co-founder of Marketo, admits that and says, we didn't do this right. And, we convinced marketers that what we need to do was follow this process through this funnel and get this MQL and hand it to sales. And we were going to build all this business. Well, as buyers caught up with us and information became more plentiful, no, it doesn't work that way. They're not, we have to honor where they are, what they want, how they buy, what informational needs they have, address that. And how do we do that if we don't know them?
You got to know. I think it's funny. All the fancy things, all the stuff people can write, and it really all just comes back to you got to know your buyer.
Well, yeah. So you do. And the thing that's interesting to me, I think, is that over the years, because I've worked for a lot of tech companies, I've probably built at least 50 director of IT personas, right?
Yeah.
No two have ever been the same. No two have ever been the same.
Wow.
Because either the type of product being sold, the industries they sell to, the size of companies they sell to and the different hierarchies or the whatever, right? No two have ever been the same. And so it's why every project is still exciting and fresh and new because they're different. Plus they change over time. A lot of people say, well, we built personas. Great. When did you do that? Well, it was back in 2014 and, okay, great. 10 years. You've got a whole different generation of buyers than you had 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
So what do you mean nothing's changed? So from the kind of content they want to the formats to the way they want to engage with you, all of it's changed.
Right.
And so, with a lot of my clients, we do refreshes on our personas at least annually, at the very latest every 2 years. Some clients will even find out during this refresh schedule that, okay, this persona is no longer on the buying committee. Get rid of that. This new one came in because the market shifted this way. So now we have a new player. We don't know who they are. They're not in our database either because we didn't know. So we got to go figure this out, and that's happening more and more now, especially with all this market uncertainty. And heck, look what's going on with the tariffs and all that stuff. And, one day you think, okay, the tariffs are going to go back to 10%. We're going to be fine. Or the next day, Trump with a 25% tariff on Apple, or that's what he's threatening this morning, right? So,
Yep.
All right, it's like, okay, wait, how do you even plan for that? How do you deal with your supply chains? How do you, your forecast is garbage. Give it up, because it's going to shift every 10 seconds. So it's like, what is the best defense about that is to stay in touch with the people that you serve and understand what's going on with them so that you can accommodate that and bring something to them that they desperately need. Everybody's scared right now. Everybody's having a hard time making decisions because they don't know. Are they going to be right or is something going to shift tomorrow and they're going to be wrong? How are things going to move forward? How do you help them deal with that? How do you help them trust that if something does shift tomorrow, you can shift along with it and help them? Right?
Yeah, you have to get to know them, and it's not enough to rest on what you know from back in the day. It's going to continually evolve. Well, my next question for you is how do people reach out? How do you want them to connect with you? Maybe they need to get an MVP or go full on, full persona.
Yeah. Well, LinkedIn is always a great place. My website is marketinginteractions.com. So either of those work really well.
Interaction. We'll link to all of that in the show notes for people. Man, Art, thank you so much for coming back on here. I'm excited we actually got this thing to work. And I'm so sorry for rescheduling on you a million times, but it's so worth it. A masterclass in getting to know your buyer and not getting tricked into thinking that AI is going to do it for you. Love it. Thank you so much for coming on here.
Yeah, you're welcome. You know, I always love talking with you.
Absolutely. We could do this all day. We'll make it a 24-hour show, you know?
And that would be frightening for people.
It would be. People would run in fear. But you know what? They'd get to know their buyer by the end of that. You know, they'd be so triggered,
Sure.
they'd have to. But yeah, that's so good. And those listening, if you learned something, and I freaking know you did. I know you did because I did. I've got literally 2 pages of notes over here, front and back. Then share this with someone else. 1 person, 3 people, 9,000 would be cool too. But even 1 person, who needs to hear this? Next time you get some crazy AI content, send them this episode so they stop doing it, right? Or maybe you're crafting some things. Share it with your team so they get to know what is up. And for the love of God, please get to know your customer. Reach out to them. Podcasts are a great way of doing that. Interviews, conversations, whatever the case may be, please do that. With that, Ardath, thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, everyone. This has been another crazy cool, very exciting episode of the Hardcore Marketing Show. We will see you all next time.